How does a warship, her entire bow sheared off, her forward compartments open to the savage sea, not only stay afloat, but sail 500 miles to safety? It defies every principle of naval architecture. It contradicts every manual of damage control. It is a story that seems pulled from maritime legend, not the brutal, factual annals of naval warfare. Yet it happened. In the closing months of the Second World War, in the treacherous, ice-choked waters of the Norwegian Sea, the Royal Navy's heavy cruiser HMS Norfolk faced annihilation. Struck by a weapon of terrifying power, she was left a mutilated, flooding wreck. Her survival was impossible. Her mission to reach the distant port of Rosyth was a fantasy. This is the story of impossible decisions, of brutal ingenuity, and of nearly 600 men who refused to surrender their ship to the depths. This is how a warship with no bow sailed 500 miles. The journey that shocked the fleet. Our story unfolds in April 1945. The war in Europe is in its final, convulsive stages. But in the frigid expanses of the Arctic, the threat remains potent and deadly. The German battleship Tirpitz may be gone, sunk by relentless RAF raids, but her sister, the Admiral Scheer, along with pocket battleships and U-boats, still pose a lethal danger to the vital Arctic convoys supplying the Soviet Union. Stationed with the Royal Navy's home fleet at Scapa Flow is HMS Norfolk, a county-class heavy cruiser. She is a veteran of these bitter waters. Commanded by Captain David Orr Ewing, a seasoned and resolute officer, Norfolk displaces over 10,000 tons, stretches 630 feet in length, and carries a formidable armament of 8 8-inch guns. Her crew of nearly 600 men is a mix of hardened North Atlantic veterans and newer recruits, all bound by the unique, claustrophobic camaraderie of a warship at sea. On April 7, 1945, Norfolk departs Scapa Flow as part of Operation Judgment, a daring offensive sweep into the Barents Sea near the Soviet port of Murmansk. The intelligence is fragmentary but alarming. German surface raiders, possibly including the Admiral Scheer, are reportedly at large. The mission for Norfolk and her escorting destroyers is clear: intercept, engage, and destroy. It is a high-stakes game of naval chess played on a board of freezing fog, drifting ice, and perpetual twilight. The strategic stakes could not be higher. A successful German raid could decimate a convoy and deliver a final, humiliating blow to Allied naval prestige in the Arctic. For Captain Orr Ewing and his men, the coming days will test not just their skill in gunnery, but their very will to survive. The first days of the operation are a tense patrol through a barren, gray seascape. Visibility is poor, a persistent mist clinging to the water. The only company is the mournful cry of the wind and the constant rhythmic thrum of Norfolk's engines. Lookouts peer into the gloom, their eyes strain for the silhouette of a mast or the telltale wake of a periscope. The crew is at action stations for hours on end, the adrenaline of anticipation slowly giving way to a grinding fatigue. Then on April 9th, contact. A distant radar blip, quickly identified as a German destroyer, the Z-33, engaged in a mine-laying operation. Norfolk's 8-inch guns roar to life, their thunderous reports echoing across the water. The German ship, outgunned and outranged, turns to flee, laying a thick smoke screen. The chase is on. 4 hours, Norfolk pursues, her shells straddling the elusive destroyer. But the Arctic weather conspires with the enemy. A snow squall engulfs both vessels, and the Z-33 vanishes into the white murk. Frustrated but undeterred, Captain Orr Ewing continues the patrol. The following day, April 10th, brings a new and far more ominous development. German reconnaissance aircraft are spotted shadowing the British force. The hunters are now being hunted. The presence of the Luftwaffe is a sure sign that heavier German units are being vectored toward them. Aboard Norfolk, the atmosphere becomes electric. This is no longer a hunt for a lone destroyer. This is the prelude to a major fleet action. By the afternoon of April 11th, the tension is a palpable force. The ship is a coiled spring. In the wireless room, intercepted signals hint at a converging enemy. On the bridge, officers pore over charts, calculating the likely approach vectors of the Admiral Scheer. The crew eats cold food at their battle stations, their world reduced to the steel shell of their turret, their damage control post, their gun mount. And then at 1,547 hours, the sea erupts. It is not the shell splash they expect from a surface engagement. It is a cataclysm from below. A massive volcanic column of water, black and white, erupts directly under Norfolk's bow. The entire 10,000-ton ship is lifted bodily from the sea, then slammed back down with a wrenching metallic scream that tears through every deck. The shockwave hammers through the hull, a physical blow that knocks men from their feet, shatters light bulbs and tears equipment from its mountings. For a terrifying moment, the world is sound, violence and confusion. The initial assessment is a torpedo from a U-boat. But the impact location is wrong, directly under the keel. As the plume of water subsides and the ship settles into a sickening forward-heavy list, the horrifying truth begins to dawn. This was no torpedo. This was a mine. And not just any mine. Intelligence would later confirm it was a new, secret German weapon. A ground mine, laid by the very destroyer they had chased days before. Designed to be triggered by the magnetic signature of a large ship's hull, it explodes not beside the target, but beneath it, breaking its back. The Norfolk has sailed directly into a trap. Chaos reigns below decks. In the forward sections, it is a scene from a nightmare. The mine's explosion occurring directly beneath A and B turrets has inflicted catastrophic damage. The entire bow structure forward of the bridge is a twisted, shuddering ruin. Critical longitudinal strength members, the ship's spine, are shattered. The forecastle deck is peeled upwards like the lid of a tin can. Both A and B 8-inch gun turrets, weighing hundreds of tons each, are jammed in their rings, their crews trapped or dead inside. But the most immediate, the most terrifying threat, is the sea. The blast has opened a gaping wound over 60 feet long. The forward bulkheads, designed to contain flooding, are crumpled like paper. Icy Arctic seawater, black and oily, is pouring into the ship at a phenomenal rate. It cascades into the mess decks, the storerooms, the magazines. It floods the paint shop, the bosun's store, the cable lockers. Within minutes, thousands of tons of water have invaded the hull. In the damage control central, the reports flooding in paint a picture of terminal disaster. The ship is taking on a severe bow-down trim. The list to port is increasing. The forward pump rooms are themselves flooding, their powerful pumps rendered useless. Engineers, battling in chest-deep, freezing water, report that the primary damage control bulkhead at frame 108 is buckling under the immense pressure. If that bulkhead gives way, the flooding will rush aft into the boiler rooms. And if the boiler rooms flood, Norfolk will lose all power, all light, all hope. She will become a dark, sinking coffin adrift in an enemy sea. On the bridge, Captain Ewing faces an impossible calculus. The ship is dying under his feet. The bow is visibly sinking lower with each passing minute, dragging the rest of the vessel down with it. The structural groans and shudders are constant, a horrible symphony of a ship in its death throes. They are hundreds of miles from friendly land, deep within range of German aircraft and U-boats. A sinking cruiser is a stationary target. The senior officers present the grim options. Option 1, abandon ship. Transfer the crew to the escorting destroyers and scuttle Norfolk with torpedoes to prevent her capture. It is the textbook procedure. Option 2, attempt to tow. But no ship in the fleet can tow a 10,000-ton cruiser with no bow stability through Arctic seas. It would be a death sentence for both vessels. Option 3, try to save her. To sail her home. To most rational minds, this is not an option at all. It is a suicidal fantasy. A ship with no bow cannot generate hydrodynamic lift. It cannot steer. It will dig its mangled forefoot into the oncoming sea and be swallowed whole. The weight of nearly 600 lives presses down on the captain. To order them to stay aboard what appears to be a sinking ship is a burden few commanders could bear. He looks out at the destroyers circling like sheepdogs, ready to take off survivors. He feels the sickening lurch of his vessel. The logical, safe decision is clear. But Captain Ewing makes a different call. A call born of sheer, stubborn defiance. He summons his senior damage control officer, Lieutenant Commander John Haynes, to the bridge. His orders are simple and utterly staggering: make the ship seaworthy. We are sailing her home. The order is met with a moment of stunned silence, then a surge of determined action. If the captain has not given up on the ship, then neither will her crew. What follows is a 48-hour marathon of brutal, ingenious, and back-breaking damage control that would become legendary in naval engineering history. The first and most critical task is to stop the flooding from reaching the boiler rooms. The buckling bulkhead at frame 108 is the final gate. Lieutenant Commander Haynes organizes a human chain of engineers and seamen, working in rotating shifts in air so thick with oil fumes it is barely breathable. They construct a massive shoring system, a labyrinth of heavy timber bulks and hydraulic jacks, against the groaning steel wall. It is a race against physics. Men work with their hands numb, their bodies battered by the ship's violent motion, shoring and reshoring as the pressure mounts. But stopping the flood is only half the battle. Norfolk is still sinking by the bow, her stern rising dangerously out of the water. This exposes her propellers and screws, causing them to race and lose bite in the water. More critically, it makes steering impossible. The ship is wallowing, a crippled beast at the mercy of the waves. Here, the crew devises a solution of breathtaking audacity. They will use controlled flooding to retrim the ship. By intentionally letting seawater into empty aft compartments, the stern magazines and certain auxiliary spaces, they can force the stern to sink and the bow to rise. It is a desperate gamble. Too much water and they sink from the rear instead of the front. But carefully calculated, it could level the ship. Pump operators work with exquisite precision, opening and closing valves, watching the inclinometers with hawk-like intensity. Slowly, agonizingly, the ship's attitude begins to change. The bow, which had been digging a grave in the ocean, rises a few precious degrees. The stern settles. The ship finds a new, terribly wounded, but more stable equilibrium. She is now on an even keel but sitting much lower in the water, a waterlogged colossus. Yet she still has no bow. The jagged, open wound is acting like a massive sea anchor, dragging against the water and threatening to tear apart the remaining hull structure with every wave impact. The solution, proposed by the ship's carpenters and bosuns, is straight out of the Age of Sail. They will build a false bow. Using every piece of timber aboard, spare planking, hatch covers, even furniture, they construct a massive wooden framework over the gaping hole. Over this, they stretch and nail multiple layers of reinforced canvas, coated in thick, tarred paint to make it water-resistant. It is not watertight. It will not keep the sea out. But its purpose is revolutionary, to provide hydrodynamic flow. To allow the water to pass over the damaged section smoothly, rather than crash into it. It is a band-aid on a gaping chest wound, but it is a brilliant one. Finally, steering. With the altered trim and the destroyed bow affecting her handling, Norfolk is almost unmanageable. The helmsman must learn to steer an entirely new ship. They discover that by using asymmetric power, applying more thrust to one propeller than the other, they can induce a turn. It is clumsy and slow, but it gives them directional control. By dawn on April 13th, a transformed, almost monstrous-looking Norfolk begins her journey. She is a floating testament to human grit. Her forward third a crumpled mass of steel patched with wood and canvas, her deck still awash, her crew operating on sheer nerve. Escorted by her vigilant destroyers, she turns her stern toward the enemy and begins the slow, painful 500-mile crawl to Rosyth. Her speed is a mere 6 knots. Every mile is a victory. Every hour, a defiance of the sea. For 4 interminable days and nights, the crippled cruiser limps southeast. She is a sitting duck. German U-boats are alerted. The Luftwaffe searches. But a combination of protective fog, aggressive screening by the escorting destroyers and sheer improbable luck shields her. The crew operates in a state of exhausted vigilance. Men sleep at their damage control stations, tools still in their hands. Engineers constantly monitor the shoring, the pumps, the makeshift bow. The ship groans and protests with every wave, a constant reminder of their precarious existence. Finally, on April 17, 1945, the faint outline of the Scottish coast appears through the haze. Tugs race out to meet her, their pilots staring in disbelief at the mangled vessel. With expert care, they guide HMS Norfolk, the ship that refused to die, into the safety of Rosyth Naval Dockyard. The scale of the damage shocks the inspecting engineers. Over 80 feet of her bow structure is destroyed. The keel is fractured. She has taken on over 4,000 tons of seawater. That she remained afloat, let alone sailed under her own power for 500 miles, is considered a mathematical and physical impossibility. The journey immediately becomes fleet legend, a benchmark of damage control and raw courage. The human cost was severe. 25 men were killed outright in the initial explosion or trapped in the forward turrets. Dozens more were injured. But without the superhuman effort of the survivors, the toll would have been the entire ship's company. For his exceptional leadership, determination, and skill in bringing his ship home, Captain David Orewing was awarded the Distinguished Service Order. Lieutenant Commander John Haynes, the architect of the damage control miracle, received the Distinguished Service Cross. Numerous other members of the crew were decorated for their gallantry and devotion to duty. HMS Norfolk was repaired, but the war ended before she could return to service. Her epic journey home, however, stands as one of the most extraordinary feats of seamanship and survival in Royal Navy history. It was not a story of a glorious battle victory, but of a darker, more profound triumph. The triumph of will over chaos, of ingenuity over destruction, of a crew's love for their ship over the indifferent brutality of the sea. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. A story not of sweeping offensives, but of quiet, desperate courage in the face of an indifferent ocean. Subscribe to WW2 Vault as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.